Thank you for joining us for this sermon podcast from United Church on the Green, located in New Haven, Connecticut. No matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are invited and welcome. If you enjoy this podcast and would like to learn more about our open and affirming ministry at United Church on the Green, please visit our website at unitednewhaven.org. Thank you.
This morning's scripture comes from Luke, chapter 16, verses 19 to 31, which can be found in your Pew Bible at New Testament, page 79. There was a certain rich man who clothed himself in purple and fine linen, who feasted luxuriously every day. At his gate lay a certain poor man named Lazarus, who was covered with sores. Lazarus longed to eat the crumbs that fell from the rich man's table. Instead, dogs would come and lick his sores. The poor man died and was carried by angels to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried. While being tormented in Hades, the place of the dead, he looked up and saw Abraham at a distance with Lazarus at his side. He shouted, "Father Abraham, have mercy on me. Send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, because I'm suffering in this flame." But Abraham said, "Child, remember that during your lifetime you received good things, whereas Lazarus received terrible things. Now Lazarus is being comforted, and you are in great pain. Moreover, a great crevasse has been fixed between us and you. Those who wish to cross over from here to you cannot. Neither can anyone cross from there to us." The rich man said, "Then I beg you, Father, send Lazarus to my father's house. I have 5 brothers. Lazarus needs to warn them so that they don't come to this place of agony." Abraham replied, "They have Moses and the prophets. They must listen to them." The rich man said, "No, Father Abraham, but if someone from the dead goes to them, they will change their hearts and lives." Abraham said, "If they don't listen to Moses and the prophets, then neither will they be persuaded if someone rises from the dead." Brothers and sisters, God is still speaking. May our hearts and minds be open to listen and understand.
Would you pray with me, please? Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your presence, for you are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. The rich man doesn't come out looking too good, does he? I mean, he seems to have it all. Secluded comfortably in his estate, protected from the presence of anyone undesirable by walls of stucco or brick or wrought iron or fieldstone, filling his belly with luxurious food and extravagant drink, wrapping his body in custom-tailored clothes made from only the finest fabrics, entertaining his socialite friends with elaborate festivities that went on for days on end, his every whim catered to by an army of domestic workers, probably overworked and underpaid, ferried to and fro when he had to leave his self-contained Eden in a smoothly gliding black car with tinted windows and a suited chauffeur at the wheel. He probably didn't even notice poor Lazarus lying there just outside the gate. Perhaps his driver advised him to turn his face away when they passed by, to spare his employer the unsavory sight. Perhaps the man was so absorbed in his Twitter account that he didn't need the reminder not to look. If he did catch a glimpse of the bedraggled sufferer, he probably turned up his nose. It was surely the guy's own failings that had landed him there. surely due to some error or flaw on Lazarus' part, surely not in any way related to the life of excess that the unnamed rich man lived. Perhaps the rich man managed some vague sense that the other man's suffering was unfortunate. Or perhaps all he could muster was a sense that if the poor guy had to suffer, it was unfortunate that he chose to do it there. Or maybe he wasn't quite as much of a self-centered prat as I just made him out to be. After all, this is a parable, and when Jesus told parables, the obvious surface-level reading usually wasn't what he was going for. When Jesus told parables, pointing the finger at someone else over there wasn't usually the response he had in mind. When Jesus told parables, I think he usually meant to make his hearers squirm, at least a little bit. When Jesus told parables, they were like medicine coated in sugar, or a fish hook covered with a big juicy worm. They went down easy, but then they got stuck in your throat, or left an aftertaste that wouldn't go away. When Jesus told parables, a truly faithful response probably sounded something like, I resemble that remark. Maybe the rich man was not quite such a living caricature after all. He was beyond comfortable, certainly, but maybe he wasn't in the 1%, but rather the 10% or 25%. He had more than he needed to meet his daily requirements, and he liked to enjoy what he had. Sometimes, perhaps, he blurred the line between needs and wants. He got accustomed to a certain standard of living, and he couldn't really imagine relinquishing it, but he could imagine having more. Perhaps he didn't think of himself as rich. After all, he could always have been richer. Maybe he did see Lazarus lying there at the gate. Maybe he snuck a quick look but turned away before the impoverished man's glance could turn in his direction. Maybe it was too hard, too painful, too scary to meet the eyes of one whose destitution was so overwhelming. Maybe to see another man's pain would have brought him too close to his own, which he had so conveniently anesthetized with creature comforts. Maybe the rich man actually wanted to help, but there was no obvious way to do so without getting involved, and heaven knew he didn't have time for that. He wasn't sure how to tell for certain whether Lazarus was one of the worthy poor or not, whether he was tugging as hard as he ought to be on his own bootstraps. He knew the statistics about addiction and substance abuse. He didn't want to give cash and unintentionally enable unhealthy decisions. He didn't know where to refer Lazarus, didn't have the phone number on hand for the soup kitchen or the emergency shelter, so he walked by fast with his eyes averted, feeling awkward and guilty. And though he always left that encounter meaning to donate to a charity that helped those people, by the time he got to work or to school or to church or to wherever he was going, that nagging intention evaporated in the swirl of important busyness with other well-intentioned people. And over time he built up a sort of spiritual callus, a thicker skin around the sensitive parts of his heart and his soul, a layer of armor that impeded his compassion until one day he no longer felt awkward. And then he no longer felt guilty. And then another day, he no longer really noticed Lazarus' presence at all. The dogs noticed. If this parable hasn't made you uncomfortable yet, perhaps this will do it. The dogs that ate the crumbs from the rich man's sumptuous table that were probably pets in the rich man's household with soft beds on which to lie, the dogs had compassion enough to come and lie down in the dust with Lazarus and lick his sores to help them heal, while the rich man walked on by, too caught up in his awkwardness or guilt or his own self-importance to do anything. Now, whether the rich man is in fact a self-centered prat, or whether he looks a little more like, well, me, it is revealing that even in death, the rich man seems to see Lazarus as below him, as subordinate, as servant, as existing only for the rich man's benefit. Though he did not help Lazarus in life, in death he has no qualms about asking, and indeed he seems to expect that Lazarus will help him, that Abraham will send Lazarus, as one would send an errand boy, to help assuage the rich man's pain. Even in death, when in theory we see no longer dimly, but now face to face, even in death, the rich man is unable to recognize that Lazarus is as much a child of God as he is, with dignity and rights and worthiness all his own. Abraham's not having it. He won't do it, or to be more accurate, Abraham can't do it. Child, he says, a great chasm has been fixed between us and you. Those who wish to cross over from here to you cannot. Neither can anyone cross from there to us. It's not that Abraham, and perhaps even Lazarus, doesn't want to help, but he cannot. The divide that the rich man created in life, with his walls, his glass, his gates, his tinted windows, his fine clothes and extravagant meals and averted eyes, that divide was fixed and could not be crossed. Our human ability to dehumanize one another, our human ability to ignore the dignity of the ones right beside us, this story says that this is a powerful thing with far-reaching consequences. And it hurts not only the ones who are pushed to the margins, but the ones doing the pushing, too. For in denying another person's full humanity, we deny our own. In cutting off another person from full flourishing, we cut off a portion of ourselves anytime we divide. Whether along socioeconomic lines or any of the many other axes of privilege and oppression, it hurts us all. It goes right back to the beginning. After all, right back to the book of Genesis, where the story says God created one human being first, and then recognizing that it is not good for the human being to be alone, God created a second one, created companionship, created human relationship with all its joys and challenges. It goes back to the beginning of the Jesus movement, too, back to the Apostle Paul's letter to the early church at Corinth, where he wrote, "The eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you, nor again the head to the feet, I have no need of you." From the beginning, we humans are created for relationship, for mutual care, and from the beginning we have struggled to live up to this high and holy call. The parable of the rich man and Lazarus is one among many examples in Scripture, and a glance at the statistics on economic inequality, globally, nationally, and locally, will tell us that we have not yet divested ourselves of the illusion that our fates are not intertwined, that our welfare does not depend on one another's flourishing. Now, if I stopped the sermon here, it would be awfully depressing. Am I right? But here's the thing. You knew there would be a thing, didn't you? Here's the thing. This is, as we said earlier, a parable. And parables are not meant to be factual accounts, informational presentations, precise descriptions of the past, or accurate forecasts of the future. This parable is not a prediction, necessarily, of what is to come. It is not a treatise on the afterlife. It is not a promise of eternal reward for Lazarus, eternal damnation for the rich man. This parable is for those 5 brothers. It is a wake-up call meant to influence our here and now. Jesus was not particularly invested in conversations about the afterlife. In fact, in the next chapter in Luke's Gospel, having been asked, "When is the realm of God coming?" Jesus responded, "The realm of God is among you." Jesus was invested in conversations about this life, about how God's realm is made manifest here and now within us, around us, among us, in the living of this life, in the relationships of this community. And because of Jesus, because of his birth, his life, his death, and his resurrection, we know that there is no chasm, no matter how deeply entrenched, that the love of God cannot overcome. Not the divide between nothingness and existence. God overcame that with a word and saw that the work of the word was good. Not the divide between divine and human. God crossed that with love incarnate, spirit enfleshed, come to life through a mother's womb. Not the divide between suffering and joy. God endured even the worst that the world could do, humiliation and mockery and betrayal and desertion and torture and crucifixion, to show us that there is no human experience that can separate us from the divine. Not even the divide between life and death, which seems the most profound chasm of all. God transcended even that to show us that nothing can put a stop to God's all-transforming love. The chasms and divides of this world seem intractable, uncrossable. The parable of Lazarus and the rich man seems to our often despairing hearts to be a foretelling of a hopeless future. But friends, take heart. The outcome of the parable for Lazarus and the rich man does not have to be the outcome for us. We can yet change. We can yet change our hearts, our lives, our communities, our world, for with God, all things, even this, are possible. Amen.